Hi there. So we're in the middle of summer, and you might be thinking, what on earth is she talking about insulation and how to retrofit insulation for in the middle of the summer? Well, you've got to remember winter is coming. It's always coming, whether you're a Game of Thrones fan or not, there is going to always be a winter coming. And the summer is the best time to deal with your insulation. And insulation doesn't only help you in the winter when it's cold, it also helps with overheating and reducing the effects of overheating. So it's also a good time to think about in the summer for keeping you cool, as well as in the winter for keeping you warm. So that's what this topic today is all about, how to retrofit insulation in your home for maximum effect. And you might be wondering, who is she? Well, I'm Jane. I'm a chartered architect and I specialise in eco homes and retrofitting existing properties, older properties, and making those sort of period property with potential into comfortable, beautiful, characterful homes that suit a modern lifestyle and help you do your bit to protect the planet. So let me give you a little bit of information about where you lose heat in your home. So about 35% of the heat loss that occurs in your home happens through the walls and through cracks around doors and windows. And then 25%, about a quarter of your heat is lost through the roof. And then about 10% is through the floor, the ground floor. So most of the heat, from those percentages, most of the heat is lost through the walls and through the gaps around the doors and windows. And the thing is that walls, especially for older properties where you've got a solid wall and no cavity, they can be quite difficult to insulate. So that's not necessarily the easiest first option, the place that's going to get you the sort of most bang for your buck, if you like. So unless you've got cavity walls and that, and if you've got cavity walls, it's a slightly newer property, maybe it's been built sort of 1930s onwards, you are talking about getting on for 100 years ago. I do work with properties that are more recent than say 1920s properties, as well as the older properties. And those sort of Art Deco, I love the Art Deco style, and those sort of 1930s houses, they're really common, especially around Manchester, and they often have cavity walls. So it is possible to look at a cavity wall retrofit insulation. And in terms of wall insulation, the cavity wall insulation that's sort of you drill holes into the wall and then push sort of pressure fill with an insulator. That is possible, but there are some risks associated with that, and I'm a little bit reticent about recommending that as an option. Although it is something you can do, it is something you can look into, but there are certainly some risks involved in cavity wall insulation as well that you should be aware that there are, and it's not just a straightforward simple thing that has no problems at all attached with it. But it is an option. Where you've got a solid wall, maybe you've got a Victorian home or something older even, then insulating the walls is going to be potentially quite difficult. And certainly if it's in a conservation area, unless you're happy to lose space internally, then it may actually just be impossible for you to insulate your walls. So that's not necessarily an option for you. So the next place where you're going to have a big effect from a heat point of view, well, and a cooling point of view as well, is the roof. And a quarter of your heat loss through the roof is quite a lot, and that's significant. But I find that most people have got insulation now in their roofs. But if you haven't, that is a really easy place to put insulation, and it's something that you can actually DIY very simply, especially where if you've got access into the roof void and you've got a ceiling and you can just unroll Some say mineral wool insulation or sheep's wool insulation perhaps. I prefer materials that are either very natural materials like sheep's wool or made from a recycled product. So there are some insulations now that are made from recycled plastic water bottles. You can get ones that are made from recycled glass, which are like a mineral fibre, a bit like a rock wool. And those, and there are lots of others, like there's some recycled newspaper ones as well. So all those sort of products I think are much better than, say, going for a petrochemical based type insulation, which are sort of insulations that I would tend to avoid if possible, even though they can be more efficient in some ways because you can use a thinner amount to get a similar effect to a much thicker amount that you need in other insulations. But if you're using something like a mineral fibre wool quilt in your loft, unrolling it sort of along just above your ceiling, then aim to get for about 300 ml thickness, 30 centimetres above your ceiling of that, to get you somewhere around the building regulations requirement. Obviously you can go for more than that, and the more insulation you use, the better effect you get from it. But there's sort of like a law of diminishing returns. So the first 150 to 200 ml that you use is going to have the biggest effect, and then after that, every 100 ml or so that you add has less and less and less of an effect. So it's worth putting more insulation, because but there becomes a point where you don't want a meters thick of insulation, and it's not necessarily going to get you down to zero heat loss. So if you have some insulation already in the roof, the chances are that it may not actually comply with current requirements. So adding another layer, it may well be worth doing that. Just check how thick it is, the insulation that you've got. And I know a lot of people use their loft space, they board it out and use it for storage. If you're going to do that, that's fine to do that. But if that's where your insulation is between the floor joists, you're limiting your potential to insulate there, and then you maybe have to look at other places to add insulation into your roof, and it starts to become a little bit more complicated, because you always need to make sure you've got ventilation, because roof is usually built out of timber, and if it's built out of timber, you need to make sure that you've got enough protection for that timber not to rot. So it can get quite technical, but if you're not using it to store with, and you've either not got any insulation or you've not got very much insulation, adding an extra roll, an extra thickness, 100 ml thickness or so of insulation on top of existing insulation, or adding up to 300 ml where there isn't any at just above ceiling level, is a good place to start with your roof. If you're replacing your roof, you're taking off all the roof finish, whether that's slate or tiles or whatever it is, then you can start to look at different options, such as a sealed roof system or an insulating sarking board. I'm not going to get into what all those things mean, but if you Google those terms, insulated sarking board, sealed roof system with breather membranes, then you will certainly find a lot of information about that. And these are sort of more high-tech ways that you can get a much more efficient roof, and you can start to reduce things like the airflow through your roof. And again, like I said before, you need to protect your roof timbers from getting damp and not being able to dry out. That's where a lot of the time roofs are well ventilated. So if you're taking away that ventilation by using something like a sealed roof system with a breather membrane, or an external insulating sarking board, then you do need to be very careful about the build up to make sure that you protect your timber from rotting and then, you know, not having a roof at all, or, you know, having a roof that's really sort of seriously compromised from a structural point of view. But these are, if you're replacing your roof anyway, it can be a really easy thing to do to add, and have a massive effect on the warmth, because it will increase your air tightness, and it's the air flow through your home from inside to outside is one of the biggest kind of things that can make a difference. And really, it's to do with drafts. And if you think about, you know, you listen to the weather reports and you hear this kind of the wind chill factor. Well, drafts inside your home are basically like a wind chill factor. You can feel them. Your body is so sensitive to air movement. And so if you can reduce the amount of air movement in your home, even if the temperature is not any warmer, just that removing that wind chill factor of the drafts will have an effect and make you feel more comfortable. So being anything that you can do to improve the air tightness of your home can be a really good thing in terms of maximizing the effect on your comfort, your thermal comfort, how warm you feel and how comfortable you feel from a temperature point of view. There are a few different ways to do that, and there are things that you need to be careful about as well when you're minimizing ventilation. Well, you must have ventilation. Ventilation is key because it's what gives you fresh air, and you need fresh air to breathe and be healthy. But it's about, you want to have control over your ventilation. You don't want air just to be coming in and out of your home wherever and anywhere, and you feeling the negative effects of that in the terms of the drafts. What you want is, you want to be able to get rid of like wet, humid air, but sort of air that you get in your kitchens or while you're showering, say, or a bath. That humidity in the air, you want to be able to get that out so it doesn't cause damage. But you, at the same time, you don't want to have just lots of air moving freely everywhere. So the sort of the jargonistic kind of phrase that is used in the construction industry is build tight and ventilate right. And that is an approach that people take when they are building new, but it's also an approach that you can take when you're dealing with an existing property, is to look to reduce the drafts and make sure that you've got the right sort of extract ventilation in the places where you need it, so that you're managing the things like humidity or any sort of toxins that you might be generating inside your home, and you're making sure you've got nice, clean, fresh, healthy air to breathe within your home, but not so many cold drafts. So this is where I think this 35% of heat loss, which is through walls, but also the gaps around the windows and doors, this is one place where it's much easier to look at, is those gaps. Deal with the gaps around the windows and doors as your sort of number one priority, really, after the roof. Look at the gaps, and different things that you can do to help you with that, to help you find where those gaps are. You can use a thermal imaging camera, and that will kind of help you identify if there are particularly some cold spots around your doors and windows. It's quite often that those cold spots will be because maybe there's a bit of a gap, and what happens, the reason you'll get gaps around your doors and windows is because of something called differential movement. And basically it just means that, say for example, your bricks and your timber windows or whatever, the two different materials, when they heat up and they get cold again, they move at they do that at different speeds. They expand and they contract, and that's true for all materials. So actually in your home, everything is moving slightly, on possibly on a microscopic level, but everything is sort of expanding and contracting with changes in moisture and with changes in temperature. and that difference in movement between one material and another material can cause cracking to occur between the junctions between different materials, and that's where you're likely to find that you get air gaps, and that's where you want to seal. So it's quite common to find that all the way around the edge of your window. And if you do that, then you just need to fill it up, get some filler, some decorator's cork even. If it's a particularly big gap, then possibly some spray foam. I don't like using spray foam, it's quite a toxic thing, but there are some places where it's worth using, and it is really effective. And around windows and door openings and pipes, any holes through an external wall, that can be a good place to use something like an expanding foam filler. So use something like that, either do it yourself or get somebody in to do it for you. And you can use either the thermographic imaging, or you can do something like, even just something like walk around with a joss stick and see if there are any places where the smoke from the joss stick is going either out or in, and you can see that smoke. I mean, there are sort of more kind of smoky things. You can get different things that smoke, and you can kind of different colours of smoke and things. But you know, something like a joss stick as a kind of a DIY version of it can work. So just doing that, taking that around your windows and seeing where the gaps are, and then filling those up will have a massive effect and give you a massive benefit. And then finally, the floor is where you lose about 10% of heat through your floor. And certainly like in older building, maybe you've got a suspended timber floor and you'll have gaps between the floorboards, and very likely all the way around where you've got the skirting board. And so as a very minimum, filling the gaps between those is going to have an impact. Anything that you put on top of your floor, like a thick carpet with a thick underlay, that adds a little bit of insulation and it will have some effect. Or something like a wooden floor finish where it's very tightly fitted and there's no gaps, that will also have a similar effect. To get even more of an effect, a better result from it, what you can do is either lift all the floorboards, and this is a really big job. You probably don't want to do this yourself, but obviously you could if you wanted to. Lift all the floorboards, or if you've got a basement, then you can do that from below. You can fit insulation then between your floor joists, below your floorboards. So either from below, in a basement, or lifting all your floorboards and putting it between your joists. And obviously you need something to hold the insulation in place, so you can use a breather membrane that you staple into the joists to give you more of an airtight effect. And that will then help you. You can use all sorts of different types of insulation under there. If you want to go one step further again and get even more comfortable space to live in, this is from a thermal point of view, underfloor heating, certainly a wet based underfloor heating, and I would go for something like a PUG. It's called a pipe in PUG system, which is a wet pipe system. It's connected to your standard central heating, and PUG is kind of like it's like a dry mix concrete that it's a sand and cement mix that you put it in dry, and then gradually over time this sort of moisture from the air reacts with the cement and it gradually will set it. That's PUG. That's what it is. There's lots of strange words and phrases used in the construction industry. This is just another of them, the pipe in PUG system. And that will give you a retrofit underfloor heating system within a suspended timber floor. There's so many different versions you can get with carrier trays and all sorts. If you Google it, you'll find loads of different things and you can get them to do calculations for you. But the benefit of central heating system where you've actually got underfloor heating instead of radiators, I mean, there are lots of benefits, but especially if you've got young children and you've got young children crawling about on the floor, then it's really you don't have to have it very high, very hot, but it's so much more comfortable for them and for you. You'll feel warmer and the heat will be where you are, where you want to be. Whereas with radiators, what you find is the heat rises up, goes up to the ceiling and then drops down, and it sort of moves around. So you're not really necessarily always getting the best results from a radiator. Not to mention, radiators take up space and they can restrict you in terms of where you put how you use your space and where you put your furniture. So there are lots of benefits under floor heating. It is a more expensive option, but it can really make your space a lot more comfortable and a lot more usable, and it is possible to retrofit it. I don't think I explained what retrofit is. Retrofit is another construction industry term. I'm thinking I'm going to do a series of construction jargon explanations so that you can all understand what people are talking about when you come across somebody who works in construction. If you have heard a construction word or phrase and you have no idea what that person was talking about and you would like an explanation, pop the word or the phrase, or as far as you understood what was said, in the comments below, and I will add that to my list of jargon to clarify. But anyway, back to retrofit. So retrofit is where you basically, with an existing building, you install something after it's been built. So whereas with a new build, you install things as you're building it, when it's retrofit, the building is already there and you're just installing it afterwards. That's it. That's what retrofit means. So breather membrane, underfloor heating and insulation, and sealing the gaps. Those are, your friends in terms of helping you make your home much more comfortable. I hope this has been really useful for you. If you have any questions about any of this, please do ask them below and I will be coming back and I will answer any questions. Or if it's a really complicated one and it's too complicated to answer in a reply, I will take your question and do another video in the future like this and explain the details for you. Okay, happy Friday and happy summer solstice, everybody. Bye for now.